What is going on, everybody, and welcome back into Barley Studios. Now, today in the studio, we're going to be working on some MonsterClay sculpting, and that being with the Peregrine Falcon. Now, this is mainly focused on the interior portions of the wing, where it's really difficult to get some of those tools into those tight spots. So let's use a different technique, and let's go ahead and sculpt out these feather textures. All right, you guys, I promised a master class in sculpting, and that is what we are doing. This is the Peregrine Falcon. Now, this is a one-to-one size, even maybe just a tiny bit slightly larger than a majority of the birds themselves. Now, we have to work on the interior portions of the wings here. As you can see, it matches the plumage across the breast of the bird here. And the left-hand side, upper portions of the wing, we do have that blocked in, but the right-hand side is really smoothed out. We have a really tight space to work with the tools in the interior portions of the wings. Now, the biggest thing we could do is we can go ahead and sculpt it here separately. So what we're going to do is we're going to sculpt this individually, and then we're going to go ahead and get it layered into position. So we're sculpting it and adding it. Now, this is MonsterClay Hard. Why am I using MonsterClay Hard as we're kind of like flattening this out here and getting the general shape with our X-Acto knife? Is because MonsterClay Hard will hold the and retain those sculpted textures as we add them in here. If we use a lot of soft or medium clay for this type of technique, a lot of times when you're using it or pressuring it into place, adding it to this existing clay, you can really smooth out those details that you've painstakingly, depending on your level, sculpted into it here. So what I'm doing, I'm just trimming it down with an X-Acto knife. That's the great thing about the MonsterClay. When you're working with thin pieces like this, it's super hard just to kind of carve away what you need to get rid of here. So I'm really just kind of sculpting in those long, elegant feathers that you kind of see, or the birds are notorious for, down the back of the wings. So the back of the wings, we've already got that sculpted in completely, and I will do a little bit of detail work on those as I finalize the last steps of the process before the mold making steps. But what we're going to do here now is I'm going to go ahead and sculpt away some of this. Now, you could call this tapering. We are tapering it in a way. So I'm really just kind of thinning this big old sheet of kind of shaped clay out here, and I'm just slowly taking it away until I get the thickness that I want. I don't want the wings feathers to be overly thick, but I do want them to be thick enough to where when I do cast it out of the polyplastics, that I want it to have the strength required for it to be a stable product. I could make them super thin and super elegant, but would they have the same strength level? I do not really think that they would. So after all, it is my sculpture after all. So we're going to make sure we have a lot of meat and material for the strength that we need. We want the bird to last a very long time when it is sculpted and casted out here. We're going to use a dental tool here. This is a dental carving tool. You'll see me use this in a lot of the previous content, not just for this project, for other sculpting videos as well. It is literally one of my favorite tools here, and it allows you to get very straight and clean lines, a lot of texture, a lot of striations. You can really push and move the clay around as you need to. Again, we were working with MonsterClay Hard here, so it is a lot more effort to get the textures into the clay, but when you get those textures in, it really does hold on to those quite well. Going down here with a hoop tool. Now, this is an angled hoop tool here. It's not the circular one. And what I'm doing here is I'm just creating the kind of like the overlying seams of the feathers here. And I'll kind of like tinker with this a little bit as I work through this process, just because I kind of want them to match the feathers on the back side of the wings, right? So a lot of those feathers, you would be able to see them from the front side and the back side of the same wing. So I need to transfer some of those overlying feathers underneath into the interior of the wing. Now, I know that's a very long-winded version of what it could be explained as, but basically, I'm trying to create those layers, and they need to look to proportion to the actual shape of the wing. Okay, so as you can see, that clay is really thinned out here around the edges. We tapered that quite well, and we have a lot of that feather texture really sculpted in here. I'm really happy with the overall shape and definition that we have. But the outside edges really aren't finalized quite yet, and we'll get to that here in just a moment. So I'm going to go ahead and gently pick this up and flip it over here. So at this point in the video, I'm going to begin overlaying that clay onto the interior portion of the bulked out wing. And this is really what makes the overall process that we're using a little bit easier, just to get some of those refined details in without having to painstakingly work with it up on the item in a very confined space. In the past, I've used this technique, so make sure you check out some other videos if you haven't done so already. Now, what we're basically doing is I'm warming up the clay on the interior of the wing that we're working with, as well as the clay on hand. You don't want to go too soft with, like too much heat with it, because you don't want it to soften up too much. But also, you want to soften it up enough to where the two pieces of clay can easily, at least a little bit, meld together. Now, you do have to apply a little bit of pressure there just to get them to attach together. So we're not like superheating the clay. Don't superheat it to where it's just like unbearable to work with, or it's just like melting in your hands. You don't need that much heat. It's really not. As you can see, the two pieces of clay are attached together already. There could be some air between them, but I'm not really worried about that. This isn't like the final form of this bird. So if there's some air between the layers of clay, that's completely okay, as long as it's not like bubbling and creating like pockets of air inside the wing itself to where those are visible in the final sculpted product here. So what I'm going to do here is these outer feathers of the wing need to be blended together. It needs to look like it's a singular piece of feather coming down off of the edges of the wings. So what I'm doing here with two fingers, gloved fingers, I'm going to go ahead and just gently heat it up and taper the edges. I'm pinching them to kind of like thin that clay out a little bit towards the edges of the wing there. Or let's just say the edges of the singular feather. So we have 3 layers of feathers that come down the exterior edges of the Peregrine Falcon wings. So what we'll do is we'll start at the very top. I'm going to superheat this up a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and just smooth this out with 2 fingers here. Now, depending on how much pressure and how you shape your fingers, depends on how much of a taper you have here. I don't want to make it a super weak portion of clay, so we're not going to take those out very far away from the wings, but we do want them to look proportional, and we want them to look like thinned out feathers, depending on the angle that you're looking at. So there we are, applying a little bit of heat there. I'm actually putting my hand behind it. If it's too much heat for my gloved hand to take, that means I'm applying too much heat to it, and it means that I'm melting some of the clay on the leg of the bird or the breast. So I don't want to overheat that texture to where it starts to soften and drip. So I'm putting my hand there. If it's too hot for your hand, it's too hot for the clay. Take it a little bit at a time. You're just softening it up to work with it here. I'm going to shape the interior of that wing as well as I get down through these exterior wing segments here. And I want to make sure I kind of blend all that in together here. Using a wire tool here, you can easily get a lot of textures put into the actual clay. Now, just be aware that when you go over this with latex or silicone or anything like that, this type of texture is very hard to capture. So it would leave you a little bit of like texture in the silicone or the latex, but some of that can easily get washed out over time, even more excessively than some of the deeper cuts of sculpted texture. So just be aware that when you cast that wire striation tool texture, it can give you different results on the finished product here. And it depends on the clay or the not the clay, but well, yeah, I'll set the clay too. If it's a hard clay, it can retain that a little bit better. If it's a soft clay, odds are it could easily get washed out when you go through the mold making process. So there's some give and take to it. So the type of clay, how much pressure, how deep those sculpted textures are, how rough they are, all makes a difference on whether it's going to like translate into the plastic when you cast that. Here we are on the final feather here. We're going to go ahead and just taper this with 2 fingers here. It is almost getting too solidified, but it is still very workable. And I am getting a little bit of mixture between medium and hard clay here. I've started just mixing them into the same container just because I kind of want to blend between the two. I actually ordered some hard for like the wings and the feathers and the legs and the feet where they're like bigger swaths of smaller gauge clay. You know, like the toes of the bird are very thin. They're very can be very manipulated if you bump them or move them in the wrong way. And I want all that to be very stout. So that's hard clay. Whereas that actual main head, the body, the stuff that really is kind of like tight to the actual foam core that we build is MonsterClay medium. It's a much softer clay. It's a lot faster and easier to work with. The hard, it takes a little bit more skill set. But once you get the hang of it, it's really nice to have. using a little bit of an X-Acto knife here just to kind of sculpt in the overall curvature of that feather still. And I'm still going to taper this a little bit more until I just get a nice smooth curvature to this feather here. Kind of rolling the bead of that over a little bit, making sure that we get a good taper here. Very nice, very important. You don't want that exterior feather to be too rough, but let's just say you did make your feathers too rough. Whatever kind of bird or like fur texture that you're making, maybe it just went through like a rough patch. Maybe the bird had a fight with a bird that's larger than it. Maybe it ran into a piece of prey that was just too large for it to handle, and it got some ruffled feathers or some bent feathers. Doesn't necessarily mean that the bird can't fly or function. It just means that, you know, that feather is just a little bit wonky. So it's what circumstances is your sculpted subject in that can apply to it. So as you can see here, the X-Acto knife is very easy to use, and if you don't use an X-Acto knife in your sculpting process, you really should. It really does level it up, and although you have to keep it away from the kiddos, it is really good to have. It easily lets you like carve in and take little small slices out of the clay, create different layers and textures. And then of course I have a lot of like metal sculpted tools here, like dental tools, things like that I like to use when I'm sculpting. But I've got to where I really just use a small handful of tools for the majority of my sculptures. And I have made videos about those in the past, about how I use those specific favorite tools to make like feather texture, fur texture, and things like that. And I just showcase like what they're called, why I use them, what I use them for, and all that fun stuff. It's just really educational and it's fun to watch. Now here is the feather all completed out here. As you can see, it looks absolutely spectacular. Now that's the left hand side of the wing. It makes the bird feel more kind of like put together, because that plumage around the top of the wing there really does match the feathers on the chest. And I might bulk those out just slightly more to give them a little bit of ruffle texture on the chest of the bird, but I'm really getting down to the nitty gritty of the actual finalized product here. Now I'll probably put all these videos that I've created so far into maybe a final form video, just for super time lapse, very fun, of the entire process of creating this piece of artwork for this amazing commission customer here. Now they have been absolutely patient and have had a great time working with them over the last year for this project. Big sculptures like this do take substantially longer. And just like that, we have one of the wings completely bulked out and sculpted to detail. Of course, we used the overlaying clay technique, so that way we didn't have to work up high and into the kind of recessed areas of the wing, making it a lot more difficult to really sculpt in a lot of those feather textures. We want to make sure that the wings and the feathers have a lot of strength to them, but they also have that illusion that they're kind of thin. We also want those feathers to be mirrored on the front and the back side, so that way it just feels like it's one cohesive piece of artwork on the entire wing. We want those seams between the exterior feathers and the interior feathers to be really nice and feathered, but not so much that they're weak and subject to breakage later. I really do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you check out some other content, guys. We got all sorts of stuff coming out here in the near future, as well as making the mold of this bad boy, and we'll be casting that out of plastic before we go into any of the massive detail work to really make this bird come alive in a realistic light. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you later.